Now, World War I. So the Allies broke out. Who was allied with who? Breaks out like this. Serbia goes into war, right, first for the Allies, and then they pull in Russia because of the Pan-Slavic Alliance. Russia pulls in France because of the Triple Entente, and the three of them wind up on one side. The other side was Austria-Hungary, who pulls in their closest ally, Germany, and it's the two of them initially. They would then pull in others. We'll get to that in a minute. Now, Great Britain holds off, and their entry into this war is going to be determined by what Germany does with Belgium. So, in France, there was a pretty stark battle line on the eastern side of France, where it borders Germany, and the Germans knew they couldn't just penetrate that line. So, can't go through the line, go around the line. And that's what they did. They went around the defensive line that France had set up, which would in World War II be known as the Maginot Line. It's not that now. But they go around the line, and in order to do that, they have to go through Belgium. Now, Belgium is neutral. They're a perfectly innocent country. They don't want anything to do with this mess. And they're scared to death that the Germans are going to invade them. So, when an invading army marches through your territory, even if you're neutral, because they're marching hundreds of thousands of men, they're tearing up your farm fields, they're taking whatever they need as far as provisions, food, livestock, horses, whatever. They are pillaging. If you don't cooperate, they'll burn your home. They are a bunch of young, rowdy men, and it wasn't unusual for them to potentially harm your wife or daughter in a sexual way, as far as rape goes. So it could be quite ugly if an invading army marches through your territory. So Great Britain tells Germany, look, don't march through Belgium. They're neutral. They don't want anything to do with you. Leave them alone. And Germany blows it off and says, we're going through anyway. Well, Great Britain had put it out there that if you march through Belgium, then we're entering the war. This is your ultimatum. If you do this, we're going to do this. If you march through Belgium, we're coming in. They march through Belgium, Great Britain enters the war. So here's how it breaks out. Central powers are going to be Austria-Hungary, Germany, the Ottoman Empire, which later becomes known as Turkey, okay, modern-day Turkey, and Bulgaria. Okay. The Allies are going to be France, Great Britain, Russia, Japan, and the United States eventually. Okay, so these guys enter later on. Italy starts out on the side of the Central Powers and switches. Okay, because they saw that who the winning team was going to be. So they're sort of in the middle. All right. Notice who's not on the list of allies. Where this whole thing started, Serbia. There's no real fighting in Serbia, and they don't really do anything to support the war. So that's an interesting fact. U.S. neutrality. Now, the United States is going to remain neutral in this war. We really weren't interested in getting into a massive endeavor in Europe. We really hoped that they kept this debacle on their side of the ocean and left us alone. We had enough to deal with Pancho Villa. But being a neutral country and being the #1 producer of war goods in the world and food in the world, it puts us in a pretty precarious or tedious position. Both sides are trying to get us to join up with them. So, the Allies, Great Britain and France, they issue a lot of propaganda and so forth against the Germans. They talk a lot about, in their press, they talk about German brutality. They call the Germans the Huns. They really give us this portrayal of Germans as barbarians. The other thing we have to contend with is that there are lots of German immigrants in the United States that have direct blood ties to the Central Powers. So there are 11 million people that live in the United States at that time that had direct blood ties to one of the Central Powers, Austria-Hungary, Germany, Bulgaria, Ottoman Empire. So that was precarious as well, because how do we go to war and recruit men to go fight against what was their home country? That's tricky. So that became a mess for us too. So you can see where both sides are sort of pulling at us. Wilson issues a decree. He very much wants to be like Washington and be neutral, okay? So he issues a decree that says that Americans will be neutral in, I love this, thoughts and deeds. How does the government regulate your thoughts? It's kind of scary, isn't it? So the deeds thing you could handle. You could see what people were doing to support the war effort, but the thoughts, really? That's tricky. So that's interesting language that Wilson chooses to use. Neutral in thoughts and deeds. Now, Germany is going to play on the sympathies of the German bloodlines. Again, 11 million people who are German-American or Austro-Hungarian-American or something. So neutrality really becomes a question. Can we truly be neutral in the time of a world war? If you're the number one superpower in the world, can you truly be neutral in a world war? Now, war industry in America. You can imagine that our economy gets quite a spike because of the war, because people are asking us to produce war goods for their cause. And our orders, war orders, go up through the roof with the start of World War I because Great Britain and France both need stuff from us. And we were happy to sell it to them. We would have been happy to sell it to Germany too. But Germany couldn't get it from us because they couldn't ship it back to Germany because of the British blockade. We'll talk about that in a second. So there was a real handicap for Germany here. J.P. Morgan and his buddies, his robber baron buddies, they are going to give $2.3, get this, billion to the Allies, to Great Britain and France, for this war effort. So they really want Great Britain and France to win here, and they also want to keep them cash infused because they could buy more stuff from these guys. The Central Powers respected neutrality initially. Germany says, all right, we get it, you're neutral, we're going to leave you alone, we're not going to mess with it. That's going to change, okay? We'll talk about that. But they do respect it at first. Now, on the water, this war on the water, how does it break out? Britain is going to blockade the German shore. So if you've got Britain over here, and then you've got Europe, okay, and Germany's sitting off in here, in order to get their boats out to sea, Germany has to send them this way, right? Well, that's not going to happen because Britain's got them totally blockaded through the North Sea and so forth, and they can't get their boats out. So Germany begins to really heavily use Untersee boats, which are undersea boats. We call them submarines. Germany is able to get out into the Atlantic Ocean because of their use of submarines. Okay? Britain didn't have the ability to find the subs or destroy the subs. At that time, the technology was not such that they could do that. So Germany promises no neutral ships will be hit. They're going to go after these British ships that are blockading them because they're hindering them economically and in the war. But Germany says we're not going to hit any neutral ships. Here's the problem. Great Britain and France are both going, they're not going to hit neutral ships. So if we paint our ship a different color and we hang the American flag on it, they're not going to hit it because they're going to think it's American, right? And Germany catches on to that game pretty quickly. They realize that Great Britain and France are playing games with them and painting their ships and flying flags in their ship that designate that they're from a neutral country. And Germany starts sinking them as well. Unfortunately, they get a couple of hours in the process. In 1915, German U-boats are going to sink 90 ships. German U-boats were very effective in the initial part of this war. Now, here's where we really get ticked off, is with the Lusitania. The Lusitania is a British passenger liner. It is a luxurious ship. Now remember, the Titanic sunk in 1912. This is a sister ship to the Titanic. It's built by the same ship manufacturing place. Okay, technical language there. But the Lusitania is very much like the Titanic in order of the splendor that was aboard the Lusitania. It was a beautiful ship. It starts out its voyage in the southern part of England, south of London, is where it's going to start out its voyage, and it's going to sail across the Atlantic Ocean to New York. While it's sitting in New York, waiting to refuel, get new passengers, get new payload, that sort of thing, the Germans issue a warning. And they basically put an ad in the American newspapers that says, don't get on the Lusitania, because we're gunning for her. We know the Lusitania is carrying illegal stuff, and we're going after her. So some Americans pay heed to this, and they don't bother getting on the Lusitania to go back to England. I'm not sure why, if you're an American, you would want to go back to England during a major war, but they did. So the Lusitania is a British ship, and it's sailing out of New York Harbor, heading back to London, back to England, okay? Now, what happens? So she gets mostly across the ocean, and she gets to the southern point. So if this is England, and Ireland sits over here, okay? So the Lusitania is sailing along, and she gets to the southern part of Ireland. She's only a few miles off the coast, a couple miles off the coast, and a German U-boat that had been given orders to search out and seek and find, destroy the Lusitania. A German U-boat has basically given up for the night. It's getting really late. The Lusitania should have been here already. Maybe we missed her. We don't know what's going on. So the captain of this U-boat, this German U-boat, basically tells the guys, look, we're gonna call it a night. We're not gonna worry about searching her out anymore. And he takes one last look through the periscope of his sub, and all of a sudden he sees steaming across the southern shore of Ireland this massive ship, and he says, we got her. So they fire one torpedo, and it goes across the bow of the boat, and it misses. But the Lusitania knows that they're sitting ducks at this point. And they fire another torpedo, and it hits the Lusitania dead on. Now, think about the Titanic, about the same size ship. How long did it take the Titanic to sink? Remember the movie? It takes a while, doesn't it? It takes many hours for the Titanic to go down, and that sucker hit an iceberg. The torpedo rips open the side of the Lusitania so badly, and we'll talk about what else happens, that the Lusitania sinks in 18 minutes. My father has an 18-foot fishing boat. It wouldn't sink in 18 minutes, okay? It would take longer than that. This sucker sinks, the whole thing sinks in 18 minutes. That's amazing, okay? So, what were they hauling, first of all? What they were hauling were 4,200 ammunition cartridges, cases of ammunition. The suspicion is when that torpedo hit the ship, that it exploded these ammunition cartridges, and that's what caused it to sink so quickly, is because it blew the sucker apart. What are the aftermath of this? 1,198 people, give or take, die in this sinking. Okay, they weren't able to get off the boat. It wasn't like the Titanic where you had hours to get people off the boat into lifeboats. 18 minutes. 128 of those people were Americans. This is really going to anger America. Okay, we weren't expecting to lose 128 people on a peaceful journey across the ocean. Some people got off the Lusitania and they managed to swim to shore, and there were some Irish on the southern coast of Ireland who saw this happen, and they actually sent some boats out to try and help whomever they could. So there were a few survivors from this, but the bulk of them went down with the ship. Now, Wilson gets really upset over this, as you can imagine. Americans are just clamoring now. We gotta go to war. And Wilson gets really upset, and he basically tells everybody to calm down, relax, take a breath. We're not going to war over this, but Germany, if you do one more thing to tick us off, we're going to break diplomatic relations with you. And breaking diplomatic relations with another country is a prelude to war. It is the tinderbox that can be set off at any time. So Wilson's not very happy, and he issues that diplomatic threat to Germany. The effects are that, but Germany would go on to sink 2 more ships that had that were peaceful passenger liners. The Arabic was one, and that's a British ship. There were 2 Americans on board there that died. And the Sussex is a French ship that they went after and destroyed. Now, finally, we have the election of 1916, because remember, in the middle of this whole debacle, we have to have a presidential election every 4 years. So in 1916, we set up for another presidential election. The Democrats are going to put Wilson back up. His mantra during this re-election is, he kept us out of war. And Americans went, oh yeah, he did, didn't he? He kept us out of war for now. The Republicans, the progressive Republicans went to Teddy Roosevelt and asked him to run again, and Teddy Roosevelt said, no way, I'm done. I'm finished, leave me alone. So the Republicans went to a Supreme Court justice named Charles Evans Hughes, and they asked him to run against Wilson. He didn't win. Wilson's going to win this hands down. I shouldn't say hands down. It's a pretty tight election. Charles Evans Hughes wins a lot of the vote in the East, but Wilson wins the South and the West. So that's what puts him over the top.